the sword, but this came to be really one of my absolute most favorite scenarios and experiences in my tenure as King of France. Just all around, the script was excellently written and the scenario was brilliantly performed for our patrons.
Bienvenue. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, where we will discover the tales, trials, and talents of Renaissance Festival performers, merchants, and die-hard attendees as we journey by way of light-hearted and even at times heartwarming conversations about the Renaissance Festival world. I am your host, Theodore Jander, aka King Francois I. Bonjour. Welcome to Coffee Talk with King Francois I, Episode 24, A Renaissance Festival Reflection. I am your host, Theodore Jander. At the end of the previous installment, I mentioned who my guest would be for episode 24. Unfortunately, I ran into some technical difficulties with the interview recording and editing process. So, that conversation will most likely be episode 25. That said, I wanted to take this opportunity to let you know what to expect in the upcoming episodes for this podcast, as well as provide or share a reflection or two regarding my involvement over the past 25 years with the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. But first, some more coffee humor to start things percolating. Why was the barista fired? They kept showing up to work in a t-shirt. With that bit of Java jocularity, grab a cup of your favorite Java, sit back, and enjoy this episode of Coffee Talk with King Francois I. To start things off, here is what you can expect in the upcoming episodes. Interview conversations with Malgar Thorvik of Thorvik Crafts, Douglas Carr, former creative director of the St. Louis Renaissance Festival, Genevieve and Mike Linder of Seymour's of London, Steve and Candy Swope of Candy's Creations, Chiara Cullen, a longtime merchant manager at various festivals around the U.S., and then I will also be doing another recorded live type series with cast, merchants, performers, etc. from the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. Also, I will be presenting the fourth and final installment for 2023 of Festivals, as well as potentially another episode of Something to Help You Sleep 3.0. Now, a reflection or several, or really one big long one, of my involvement over the past 25 years with the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. In the episode where King Francois I interviewed me, or I interviewed myself as me, but was also the king. It becomes confusing sometimes. Anyway, I mentioned a bit about my involvement in the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. To do a brief recap, I attended the inaugural year in 1999 as I had friends involved and they invited me out. As the second season began, those same friends encouraged me to join the cast, and so I did. And I believe in the first rehearsal, if not the second, I was asked to portray Francis II, or Francois II, or
or in the French of Francois II, the Dauphin of France. I agreed, and one could say that was the start of my career in the Renaissance festival world as royalty. Slight step down in character, still noble, very high-ranking noble. In the second year, I took the role of Anne de Montmorency, who was master of the royal household. And that was done because the son of the gentleman who was the king before me, his son played the part of the Dauphin. Well, after the season of 2001, I was asked to become Henry II, or Henri II, as they were moving forward in time to the year 1549. I portrayed Henri II through the season of 2006, with a brief hiatus in 2003 when my daughter was born. Although I was involved with the goings-on during the lead up to that season's run and also attended the fair. In 2007, we went back in time then to the 1520s and late 15 teens and the reign of Francois I. One might say that the rest is just history. Yeah, sure. But really each season had its own unique experiences and memories, especially regarding the overarching story that drove our interactions throughout each of the festival days over the years. I don't remember much about the scenarios from the first several years. One thing I do recall was something to do with the disappearance of the Maltese falcon statue. However, I have kept, since 2004, a number of the scripts and such. So I thought, as the 25th anniversary season of the St. Louis Renaissance Festival kicks off on September 16th, we could take a brief journey down the scenario memory lane. First, we begin in the year 2004, or 1555 being the setting for that season's scenario, the Grande Partie des Lions. The focus was on how Henri II would bring France out of a financial debacle, and included the first live chess match at the St. Louis Renaissance Festival, anyway, as the culminating scene of the day. Joust for the Cure was the scenario theme in 2005, which involved Nostradamus and a ruse that delved into an outbreak of the plague. 2006 season brought us Coup de Jarnac, where we began what became an ongoing bit over the years with a bell that was rung to indicate the opening of the festival day. It started that we had a bell, and then eventually the bit evolved to where we didn't have a bell, but we still wanted people to ring it. So it was entertaining. Anyway, out of that scene for that year, we discovered the opening scene in particular. We discovered one of the characters, Guy Chabot, Sieur de Jarnac, was causing some problems that thankfully were ultimately remedied by the end of the day. As I mentioned, I had become my father, Francois I, beginning in the season of 2007. The scenario was held in 1523 Petit Lyon and focused on the meeting between Francois I and Giovanni du Verrazzano to discuss plans for an expedition to the New World. Then in 2008, we had the fall of Bourbon, or Charles Bourbon, as it were, presented there the discord between Charles Bourbon and Francois I, and what culminated, what I think, into a really intense scene that involved a duel, actual sword fight between the Duke, Charles Bourbon, and myself, King Francois I. Going into that season, I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to fight with a sword. But this came to be really one of my absolute most favorite scenarios. and experiences in my tenure as King of France. Just all around, the script was excellently written and the scenario was brilliantly performed for our patrons. The scenario, the season of 2009, took place in the year 1518. So we went back a few years. Francois I was in negotiations with King Henry VIII of England to arrange the betrothal of Francois' son to Henry's daughter. However, King Henry VIII was only present in name. We did not actually have King Henry or King Henry's court present. However, out of that negotiations, or within those negotiations, there was an obstacle in the way. King Henry's sister, Mary Tudor, who was also the widow of the late French king, Louis XII, was in possession of the Mirror of Naples, which was one of the French crown jewels, and she was using it as a bargaining chip. She was not wanting her next marriage arranged by either Francois or Henry. She desired instead to wed her one true love, Charles Brandon. Unfortunately, the diamond vanished thanks to some fairy mischief, and this then created some entertaining scenes throughout the festival day. Thankfully, all of that was resolved at the end of the day when the jewel reappeared. A Day of Duels was the scenario for 2010. In that storyline, each day was filled with, I'm sure you could guess, duels. However, they weren't only duels of sword, they were also duels with words, and these occurred between various characters of the realm. 2011 saw the first year really without a focused scenario other than arriving in Petit-Léon for a wonderful festival. During the opening scene, I recapped the past few years of scenarios by asking if there was anything about which I was to be made aware. That was a common question for a few years, like, is there something I need to know about? And something would always come up. Well, in 2011, the response from the cast was nothing. I'm thinking, really? So I asked, no missing statues of birds, no banking or money issues, no overeager doctors or inquisiting minds, no impersonating explorers, overachieving families like the Bourbon, confusion over the ringing of the bell, no missing jewels, no spies. And they all responded again, no, nothing. And so with that all said, we just had a fantastic, fun-filled fair season. 2012, the focus was, again, just really having a celebration, just a big party in Petit-Léon. There was a change in that from 2006 to 2011 Ren Fair, I had long hair. Well, I had gone from having long hair to having short hair by 2012. And so that was worked into the opening. And what we did was I had to use a different barber surgeon because the one who traveled with my entourage had become sick and wasn't able to do the job. And so the local guy that was found, he ended up not being able to control his sneeze. And when he sneezed, he cut off a big chunk of hair and then he disappeared because he realized what he had done. And I wanted him found and punished. It was a quick resolution. It was done without bloodshed. And we all went about our merry festival day. That celebration component continued into 2013 with the St. Louis Renaissance Festival Crystal Jubilee celebration. In 2014 and 15, we integrated preparations for the Field of the Cloth of Gold into the activities of the festival day. And we also introduced into the cast, so becoming a permanent part of the cast, was Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, and their entourage. Another quite rather significant change that occurred in 2014 was when Mid-America Festivals bought the Greater St. Louis Renaissance Fair, who up until 2014 had been run by the organization Renaissance St. Louis. And with that purchase also came a name change from the Greater St. Louis Renaissance Fair to the St. Louis Renaissance Festival. From 2016 until 2020, the scenarios were pretty loosely focused mostly on the two kings convening over a grand celebration in Petit Lyon. And for a time, we were in Ballingham in the north of France, which was actually under English control at that time. We only spent a few years, quote unquote, in Ballingham before we made return to Petit Lyon. Then in 2021, we brought back more scene-based scenario with Robin Hood, Maid Marian, and the Sheriff of Nottingham venturing to the town of Petit Lyon. With their introduction, it created some entertaining encounters between the aforementioned characters and the French and English courts, as well as all of the patrons. A character likened to Cinderella drove the storyline then for the season of 2022 and included some dueling excursions, if you will, between, I think it was the three Rodrigos. It all ended, regardless of the duels and all that, with a delightful transformation, the recovery of stolen pearls, which was a part of that storyline. And at the end of the day, we just had a rockin' great time with dancing and singing. That brings us to this upcoming 25th anniversary season in 2023. To find out about the upcoming scenario, come join in what will be a delightful experience. I will say it has been a real treat reminiscing about some of the storylines in which I have participated over the past 25 years. To be a part of such a rich history and hundreds to really thousands of interactions with patrons, cast, entertainers, artisans, staff, merchants. It's truly humbling and character building. I am looking forward to what the future holds and what stories will unfold. I do hope you enjoyed this excursion down memory lane. Be on the lookout for the next installment to be released on Friday, August 25th. To hear a bonus story shared by a previous guest, I invite you to join the wonderful community of listeners supporting the show and making new things possible through Patreon. You can also receive early access every other week to each new episode, as well as receive a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the production and creative process for the podcast. Learn more at www.patreon.com/Coffee Talk with King Francois. The link will be provided in the show notes. If you are a performer, merchant, staff, or diehard patron in or of the Renaissance Festival world and would like to be featured on Coffee Talk with King Francois I, reach out to me by way of clicking on the following link provided in the show notes: www.theodorejander.com/Coffee Talk Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to Coffee Talk with King Francois I. A bientôt. See you soon. Ciao for now and au revoir.